Most people assumed that everything about Tammy Wynette's life had already been uncovered, analyzed, and debated for years. But the quiet home she once lived in on the outskirts of Nashville has always been different. It carried a silence that felt too intentional, as if the walls themselves were guarding pieces of her life she never meant to share. And recently, when a set of long-stored belongings resurfaced from deep inside that house, the discovery left even longtime fans unsettled. Not because of anything dramatic on the surface, but because of what those items implied. Hints of private worries, unfinished thoughts, and unexplained tensions that were never publicly addressed. And the more people looked into it, the more obvious it became that Tammy's story wasn't quite as complete as everyone once believed. Tammy's Nashville home had always been a place wrapped in contradictions. On one hand, it was the heart of her success, the place where she rehearsed, wrote, celebrated, and tried to hold her life together through every storm. But on the other hand, people close to her often described an unusual heaviness around the property, almost as if Tammy herself struggled to feel fully at peace inside it. Over the years, stories emerged about rooms she rarely entered, boxes she insisted stay sealed, and belongings she refused to throw away, even when they no longer had any clear purpose. These weren't dramatic secrets, but they hinted at a deeper truth. Tammy was someone who carried the weight of her past in quiet ways, sliding pieces of her life into corners where no one would think to look. That subtle mystery didn't seem important at the time, but decades later, it became the starting point for everything that would follow. Because when people began going through the home again with fresh eyes, they quickly realized that Tammy had left behind more than anyone expected. For years, Tammy's family had whispered about certain things they believed might still be inside the house. Items they remembered seeing in her early years, or notes she jotted down during difficult periods, or personal objects that seemed to vanish without explanation. None of it felt urgent enough to investigate back then, but the uncertainty lingered. Some relatives believed she tucked away important paperwork when she felt overwhelmed. Others recalled sealed drawers she told people not to touch, and online discussions only added fuel, with fans debating what could have been hidden or overlooked after Tammy passed. Of course, none of these claims were ever confirmed. They existed in that blurry space between personal memory and rumor. But when the home was revisited years later, the old suspicions suddenly felt relevant again. If Tammy really had stored things away during chaotic moments in her life, then the house was the only place those fragments would still exist. And this possibility set the stage for the next step. An unexpected re-examination sparked by renewed interest in her story. The renewed attention didn't happen overnight. It began quietly as documentaries, interviews, and retrospective specials brought Tammy's life back into the public conversation. With every new discussion came fresh questions, not just about her career, but about the private pressures she lived with and the unresolved moments that still confused fans. Soon, people began to wonder whether her home contained answers that had never been explored. That curiosity led to a slow but determined effort to revisit the property, not to uncover scandal, but to finally understand what Tammy left behind. As boxes were moved, closets opened, and forgotten storage spaces examined, the atmosphere shifted. Some items were predictable, others were deeply personal. But one specific discovery, something tucked away where no one had looked in years, changed the tone of everything. And it was this moment that turned a simple search into a mystery people still can't stop talking about. What made the discovery inside Tammy Wynette's Nashville home so unsettling wasn't that the items themselves were dramatic. It was the way they connected to old uncertainties that had followed her for years. When the renewed search reached one of the deeper storage spaces, tucked behind aging furniture and boxes long untouched, something unexpected emerged. A cluster of personal belongings that had been sealed away with surprising care. At first glance, the collection seemed ordinary. A worn notebook, a handful of letters, a few envelopes that looked like they'd been moved from place to place before finally ending up in that quiet corner. But once the contents were examined more closely, the tone changed instantly. Inside the notebook were pages filled with Tammy's handwriting, though the entries felt different from the polished writing fans were used to. These notes were raw, scattered, almost frantic at times, written during seasons of her life marked by stress and confusion. Some entries were simple reminders to herself. Others hinted at fears she never spoke about publicly, concerns about people she relied on, frustrations with financial situations she didn't fully understand, and moments where she seemed unsure who she could trust. None of the notes were explicit or dramatic on their own, but collectively, they painted a picture of a woman wrestling with far more than what made it into interviews or television specials. Alongside the notebook were letters, some opened, some never mailed, expressing gratitude to people she felt supported by, and quiet disappointment toward those she believed had let her down. Again, nothing in the letters was confirmed to be tied to any major event, but the tone suggested a complicated personal life that didn't always match the glamorous image the world saw. And tucked beneath these papers was something that grabbed everyone's attention, a small bundle of documents related to her medical care. These weren't alarming in a literal sense, but the fact that they were hidden away instead of stored with her usual paperwork sparked questions. Why these? Why here? Why sealed off from everything else? Online, fans quickly began speculating about what the documents meant, with some suggesting they revealed gaps in the timeline of her treatments. Others believed they reflected confusion Tammy herself felt, confusion she never had the chance to explain. While none of these interpretations are verified, the discovery alone was enough to reignite long-standing conversations about Tammy's later years. And as people continued digging through the box, they realized the notebook wasn't the only item raising eyebrows. What came next held an even stranger energy, something that suggested Tammy was wrestling with issues even closer to her heart. If the documents found earlier seemed disorganized and emotional, the next set of items took things in an entirely different direction. This time, the notes appeared far more deliberate, as though Tammy had written them not in hurried moments, but during periods when she was consciously reflecting on the people around her. These pages weren't dated, which left room for speculation, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. What made these particular entries so unnerving wasn't what they said outright. It was what they suggested indirectly. Across several pages, Tammy had written lists, names, moments, small reminders, and cryptic phrases that didn't seem connected at first. Some names were familiar: family members, friends, associates. Others were unknown to those examining the notes. And beside certain names were short, ambiguous comments like "be careful," "don't trust," or "ask questions." None of the statements were accusatory or dramatic, but the pattern felt strange. Why create a list like this at all? Why save it? And why hide it away? This is where speculation began to grow rapidly. Online discussions interpreted the notes in dozens of different ways. Some believed the lists reflected Tammy's attempts to sort through her complicated relationships, something many artists and public figures struggle with. Others thought the notes revealed a deeper concern she had about people who may have influenced major decisions in her life. There were even discussions claiming the notes hinted at internal conflicts surrounding her finances or health, though none of these claims have been confirmed. Still, the tone of the writing made people uneasy because the woman who appeared on stage seemed confident, composed, and larger than life. These private notes suggested a very different reality, one filled with second-guessing and quiet anxieties. What made things more complicated was the presence of what looked like unfinished messages, letters Tammy wrote to herself, reminding herself not to forget things that clearly weighed on her mind. One sentence, partially crossed out, mentioned the pressure she felt during an unspecified situation. Another referenced something she intended to address later, though what that meant was impossible to determine. Every page seemed like a puzzle with missing pieces as the notes circulated through fan communities and investigators alike. One question grew louder. If Tammy was writing these thoughts down, what else might she have kept to herself? And more importantly, did she leave behind anything that provided answers rather than raising more questions? That curiosity set the stage for the next, more controversial discovery. Something that made even lifelong fans pause before speaking about it publicly. It was around this point that rumors about tapes, audio, and possibly video resurfaced. For decades, fans whispered about the idea that Tammy kept private recordings, either as part of her songwriting process or as personal documentation during troubling times. None of this was proven, but the idea had lingered in fan circles long enough to become part of her unofficial mythology. When the items found in her home reignited interest in that possibility, the conversation quickly escalated. Some reports online claimed that an old cassette was discovered among the belongings, though no official confirmation ever followed. This fueled the belief that Tammy may have recorded her thoughts during periods when she felt isolated or misunderstood. Fans began speculating that if these recordings existed, they might contain raw emotional reflections, perhaps even her attempts to make sense of the pressures she faced. Again, nothing about these theories has been authenticated, but the possibility alone created a wave of discussion. Forum posts, social media threads, and even small fan communities started analyzing old interviews and public appearances, looking for clues that Tammy might have hinted at recording things for herself. A few users pointed out moments where she mentioned documenting ideas during songwriting, while others recalled stories of her using tapes to work through melodies or lyrics. These small fragments, when combined with the resurfaced rumors, made the alleged tape discovery seem just plausible enough to keep the mystery alive. But the most unsettling part wasn't the idea of Tammy recording her thoughts. It was the suggestion that some of these recordings were created during moments when she felt most overwhelmed. Fans speculated that she might have used the tapes as a way to express emotions she couldn't share with those around her. The idea created an eerie sense of closeness, as if someone had stumbled into a room filled with her unfiltered inner voice. Still, without official confirmation, these theories remain just that, theories. And yet, even with so little evidence, the rumors refused to die. If anything, they gained momentum as more people became aware of the items found in her Nashville home. The idea that Tammy Wynette may have left behind hidden recordings isn't what unsettles people most. It's the fact that, true or not, her story now feels incomplete without knowing whether those final pieces exist. And with the tapes, rumored or real, occupying so much attention, many forgot to consider the emotional weight of the home itself and what it symbolized as a whole. While individual discoveries inside Tammy's home caused plenty of discussion, the most unsettling aspect wasn't a single object. It was the overall atmosphere created when all the pieces were viewed together. Her home wasn't just a building filled with belongings. It was almost a time capsule of someone who carried far more emotional weight than her glamorous image ever suggested. Every room told a different story, and none of them felt complete. Her bedroom still had traces of routines she followed for years, with personal items arranged in quiet patterns that reflected a woman holding onto familiarity wherever she could find it. Her office space held drafts of lyrics that spoke to longing, heartbreak, resilience, and exhaustion. Not just the polished lyrics the world heard, but the earlier attempts that revealed her raw, unfiltered thoughts. Even her walk-in closet carried emotional tension with old outfits, untouched accessories, and sentimental items preserved as though she planned to return to them. What truly disturbed people wasn't the existence of these items, but the emotional heaviness they created when viewed all at once. It became impossible to ignore how deeply Tammy must have struggled behind the scenes. The personal notes suggested worry. The medical papers hinted at confusion. The letters suggested unresolved feelings, and the rumored tapes implied she may have tried to process everything in private. Inside the home, every discovery, confirmed or rumored, overlapped into something larger. A silent portrayal of a woman who lived with more complexity than the public ever knew. It was a reminder that fame doesn't shield people from fear, uncertainty, or emotional pressure. It only hides it better. And for Tammy, who spent decades projecting strength and beauty, the contrast between her public image and her private environment became the most haunting revelation of all. This final realization created the heaviest moment of the entire discovery process, because people suddenly understood that the most disturbing part wasn't what they found, but what it implied about everything she never said. When everything was finally collected, examined, and discussed, it became clear that Tammy Wynette's Nashville home didn't reveal a shocking secret or a dramatic twist. Instead, it exposed something far more real and far more unsettling: the quiet truth of how much she carried within herself. Each item, note, and rumor added another layer to a story fans thought they already understood. And yet, the deeper people looked, the more obvious it became that Tammy lived a life filled with unanswered questions, emotional burdens, and private struggles she kept tucked away. In the end, what truly disturbed people wasn't the discovery of one object. It was the discovery of a woman whose life was far more complicated, fragile, and guarded than the world ever knew. And the biggest question now isn't what they found inside her home, it's how much Tammy wished the world would never see.